I assumed the silence in our childhood home would be the heaviest thing to carry after Mom and Dad died within months of each other. I was wrong. The real weight arrived when my older sister changed the locks and weaponized my adoption like a legal loophole, standing on the porch with my life packed into cardboard boxes. I realized grief was manageable, but being erased from my own family history was a violence I never saw coming. The drive back to Briar Glen felt less like a homecoming and more like a descent into deep water. The Pennsylvania humidity hung heavy over the valley, sticking my shirt to the back of the rental car seat, blurring the edges of the maple trees that lined the winding roads I used to know by heart. I was 33 years old, and for the second time in 6 months, I was making the trip home to bury a parent. Mom had gone first. A slow fade that gave us time to prepare, though you never are truly ready. Dad followed her with a sudden, brutal efficiency, a heart attack in the garden, right between the hydrangeas and the tool shed, just like that. The house on Elm Street, the anchor of my entire existence, was legally and spiritually untethered. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked exactly the same and yet entirely wrong. The white siding was bright against the gray sky, but the windows looked like closed eyes. It felt as if the structure itself was holding its breath, waiting for a permission it would never receive. I turned off the ignition and sat there for a long moment. My hands were shaking. I told myself it was just the caffeine and the 4-hour drive from the city. But I knew better. It was the silence that was waiting for me inside. My older sister's car, a pristine silver SUV that always looked like it had just been washed, was parked near the garage. Avery. She had arrived 2 days ago, taking charge of the arrangements while I wrapped up projects at work, paralyzed by a grief that felt too large to navigate. Avery did not get paralyzed. Avery got busy. I walked up the front steps, fumbling for my key. I slid it into the lock, expecting the familiar catch and turn. It stopped halfway. I jiggled it, pulled it back, tried again. It would not turn. The door swung open before I could knock. Avery stood there, dressed in a sharp black blazer and dark jeans, her phone pressed to her ear. She looked impeccable, her blonde hair pulled back in a tight, severe bun that pulled at the corners of her eyes. "Hold on," she said into the phone, lowering it to her chest. She looked at me, not with a hug, but with a critical scan, starting at my shoes and ending at my wind-blown hair. "You are late, Lillian. Traffic on the turnpike was a nightmare," I said, staring at the lock. "Did you fix the door handle?" My key would not work. Avery waved her hand dismissively. "I had a locksmith out yesterday. The old tumblers were sticking. Safety first. I will get you a spare when I find where I put the new set. Come in. The florist is on hold, and I need you to approve the lilies." I stepped inside, and the smell hit me. Lemon polish and stale coffee. Underlying the faint, permanent scent of Dad's pipe tobacco that had seeped into the drywall over 40 years, but something was missing. The entryway table was bare. The stack of mail that usually teetered on the edge was gone. The framed photo of Mom and Dad from their 20th anniversary had been removed from the wall, leaving a pale rectangle in the paint. "Where are the pictures?" I asked. "I packed them away," Avery said, lifting the phone back to her ear. "Too much clutter makes the place feel smaller. We have people coming over after the service tomorrow." She turned her back to me, resuming her conversation about floral arrangements, ordering standing sprays as if she were ordering lunch. I stood in the hallway with my duffel bag, feeling like a guest in the only place where I had ever truly belonged. The funeral was a blur of black wool and damp handshakes. The church was full, a testament to Dad's 40 years as a high school history teacher. I sat in the front pew next to Avery and her husband, Graham. Graham looked pale, his suit hanging a little loose on his frame. He gave me a weak, apologetic smile when I sat down, but Avery stared straight ahead, her profile etched in stone. Throughout the service, I felt a numbness that I mistook for strength. It was only when the priest mentioned Dad's laugh, that booming, room-shaking sound, that my throat closed up. I reached for a tissue, and I felt Avery's hand touch my elbow. It was not a comfort. It was a correction. "Pull it together," she whispered, her lips barely moving. "People are watching." I straightened my spine, swallowing the sob. That was the dynamic. Always. Avery was the manager. I was the mess. Avery was the legacy. I was the lucky addition. The reception was held at the house. The air conditioner hummed, struggling against the heat of 50 bodies packed into the living room. Neighbors I had known since kindergarten pressed casseroles into my hands and murmured apologies. Then I heard Avery. She was standing near the fireplace, holding a glass of white wine, talking to a distant cousin and his wife. I moved to join them, desperate for a familiar face, but I stopped when I heard her voice. "We are holding up," Avery was saying. Her voice pitched perfectly to carry compassion and authority. "It is a lot to manage. Of course, the estate is complicated, but I am handling the heavy lifting. Lillian is taking it hard. You know," she gestured vaguely in my direction without making eye contact. "She is the adopted one," Avery said. She dropped the volume just enough to make it feel like a confidence, but loud enough for the circle to hear. It hits differently for her. She feels untethered. The cousin nodded solemnly, as if this explained everything, as if my grief was a distinct, inferior species because my DNA did not match the man in the casket. I backed away, my stomach turning. It wasn't the first time Avery had used that distinction. When we were kids, it was a weapon used in arguments over toys or curfews. You are not even really from here, but to say it now, today, while Dad's earth was still fresh, it felt strategic. I spent the rest of the wake in the kitchen, washing dishes that didn't need washing, just to avoid the pitying looks of people who had just been told who I really was. That night, after the last guest had left and Graham had retreated to the guest room to take a conference call, I found Avery in the study, or rather, the room that used to be the study. The filing cabinets were open. The desk, usually a chaotic landscape of bills, historical journals, and correspondence, was swept clean. 3 large plastic bins sat on the floor, sealed with duct tape. "What are you doing?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe. "We haven't even read the will yet." Avery didn't look up. She was shredding a stack of papers, the machine whining as it chewed through old utility bills. "Cleaning," she said. "Dad was a hoarder. Lillian. He kept receipts from 1995. If we are going to get this house appraised, we cannot have it looking like a paper mill." "Appraised?" I stepped into the room. "Who said anything about selling?" Avery stopped shredding. She turned to face me, bracing her hands on the edge of the mahogany desk. "We have to be realistic," she said. "The upkeep on this place is astronomical. The taxes alone are killing the estate, and I am the one paying the funeral home. Lillian, I am the one fronting the costs for the maintenance. Unless you have $10,000 sitting in your checking account to contribute." She knew I didn't. I worked in insurance claims. Decent money. But living in the city was expensive, and I had just paid off my student loans. "I have some savings," I said defensively. "But we should wait. We need to see what Dad left. He told me last Christmas he had everything organized with Hawthorne." Avery sighed, a long, weary sound that made me feel 5 years old. She opened the top drawer of the desk and pulled out a single sheet of yellow legal pad paper. She slid it across the desk toward me. I picked it up. It was Dad's handwriting, undeniable in its looped, hurried scrawl. It was dated 3 months ago. "Avery will handle the estate. She knows what needs to be done. I trust her to take care of the house and family matters." There was a signature. No witness signatures. No notary stamp. Just 2 sentences on a piece of scratch paper. "This is not a will," I said, looking up at her. "This is a note. It is a statement of intent," Avery said, snatching the paper back and slipping it into a folder. "And combined with the fact that I am the executor named in the previous draft, it is enough. Dad knew you were emotional. Lillian, he knew you couldn't handle the logistics of a property this size. He wanted me to take the lead. I sensed a trap closing around me, but I couldn't see the mechanism yet. "We need to see Daniel Hawthorne," I said firmly. "I want to hear what the actual lawyer says." "Fine," Avery said, turning off the shredder. "We have an appointment tomorrow at 10. But do not expect a pot of gold. Lillian, Mom's medical bills ate through most of the cash. We are looking at a house and a lot of debt. That is the reality. I slept on the couch that night. Avery claimed the guest room was full of boxes, which was a lie. I had checked, and that Graham needed the master bedroom because he had insomnia. The couch was lumpy, and the living room smelled of dying lilies. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle. It groaned and creaked, sounds I usually found comforting, but tonight they sounded like warnings. The offices of Hawthorne and Peck were located in a brick building downtown, sandwiched between a bakery and a dentist. Daniel Hawthorne had been Dad's lawyer for 20 years. A man who wore bow ties and always smelled of peppermint. When we walked into the conference room, Daniel stood up, looking flustered. He was younger than I remembered, maybe early 60s, but he looked tired. His desk was covered in files. "Avery, Lillian," he said, nodding to each of us. "My deepest condolences. Your father was a good man." "Thank you." "Daniel," Avery said. She sat down before he offered a seat, placing her designer handbag on the table with a heavy thud. "We want to get this moving as quickly as possible. I know you are busy." Daniel cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. "Yes, well, the situation is a bit fluid. I was in the process of drafting a new codicil for your father when he passed, but it was never signed. So we revert to the previous will?" I asked. "The one from 10 years ago?" Avery cut in. "The one where I am executor. And we have the handwritten addendum regarding my authority over the property." She slid the yellow paper across Daniel's desk. He looked at it, his expression unreadable. "This has some weight regarding intent," Daniel said carefully, "but it is not a binding testamentary document in itself. However, if there is no contest, there is no contest," Avery said sharply. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thick blue folder I had never seen before. She placed it on top of the yellow note. "Daniel," she said, her voice dropping to a professional. "Chile register. I need to review the details in this file with you, regarding the outstanding liabilities and the transfer of the deed." I leaned forward. "What file is that? What liabilities?" Avery turned to me, her eyes flat. "Lillian, this is boring tax stuff. Why don't you go get a coffee? Daniel and I need to sort out the boring math." "I am not going to get a coffee," I said, my voice rising. "I am his daughter too. I have a right to know what is happening." Avery looked at Daniel. Daniel looked at his hands, then at me. "Lillian," he said gently, "as the executor, Avery does have the privilege to discuss certain administrative preliminaries, privately, if she requests it." I looked at him, shocked. "You are kicking me out of the meeting?" "It is just for a moment, Lillian," Avery said, waving her hand toward the door. "Go, please. You are making this harder than it needs to be." I stood up, my legs feeling like lead. I looked at Daniel, hoping he would stop this, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. He was studying the blue folder Avery had put down. I walked out of the conference room and sat in the waiting area. The receptionist, a woman named Sheila, who used to give me lollipops when I was 6, pretended to type furiously on her computer. I sat there for 45 minutes, staring at a landscape painting on the wall, listening to the muffled murmur of voices from behind the heavy oak door. When the door finally opened, Avery walked out, looking energized. Daniel followed, looking pale, all set. Avery said, clapping her hands together, "Let's go. Lillian." "What happened?" I asked Daniel. He looked at me with a profound sadness. "We are proceeding with the administration. Avery will explain the immediate steps." That night, the house felt hostile. Graham had gone out to pick up dinner, leaving Avery and me alone. I was in the kitchen, making tea, trying to calm the nausea that had been rolling in my stomach since the lawyer's office. Avery walked in. She didn't want tea. She poured herself a glass of water and leaned against the counter, watching me. "We need to talk about your living situation," she said. I turned around, the kettle whistling softly behind me. "What about it?" "I am staying here until we figure out the estate. That is the thing," Avery said. She took a sip of water. "The estate is figured out. The house, it is going to me." I stared at her. "What?" "That is not what the will says. The will says everything is split 50-50. The will covers residual assets," Avery said calmly. "But the house?" "Dad transferred the title into a trust a few months ago. A trust where I am the beneficiary." My cup rattled against the saucer as I set it down. "Why would he do that?" "To protect it," she said. She put the glass down and took a step closer to me. The space between us felt charged, electric with years of unspoken resentment. "Look, Lillian," she said, her voice dropping to that reasonable, condescending tone. "You have to understand. Dad and Mom loved you. They did. But this house, this land, it has been in the Stewart family for 4 generations. It is history. It is blood." I felt the air leave the room. "Blood? You know what I mean," she said quickly. "It is about lineage. Dad wanted to make sure the house stayed in the direct line. He knew you. Well, you have your own path. You are not tied here the way I am. I am their daughter." I whispered. "I grew up in this kitchen. I learned to walk in that hallway." "I know," Avery said. "And that was a gift they gave you. A wonderful childhood. But you were not really meant to inherit the legacy. Lillian, you were borrowed. And now that they are gone, things have to go back to the way they were meant to be." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a white envelope. It was thick. "Dad set this aside for you," she said, holding it out. "There is $5,000 cash in here. He wanted you to have a cushion, to get started somewhere else." I looked at the envelope, then at her face. Her expression was almost pitying. She truly believed she was being generous. She was buying me out of my family with $5,000. "I am not taking that," I said, my voice shaking. "Take it, Lillian." "No." I backed away until my back hit the refrigerator. "I am not leaving. Avery, this is my home. You can't just rewrite the will because you think biology is a deed." Avery's face hardened. The pity vanished, replaced by a cold, steel resolve. "It is not up to you," she said. "I am the owner. I am the executor. And I am telling you that you cannot stay here. You are upset. And you are making Graham uncomfortable. And quite frankly, you are trespassing on property that does not belong to you." She tossed the envelope onto the kitchen table. It landed with a soft slap. "Take the money. Lillian, don't be stupid." I walked out of the kitchen, passed the envelope, and locked myself in the downstairs bathroom. I turned on the faucet so she wouldn't hear me crying. I sat on the edge of the tub, shaking so hard my teeth chattered. I didn't understand. Dad would never do this. Mom would never allow it. The cruelty of it. "You were borrowed." Felt like a physical blow. I eventually fell asleep on the couch again, fully clothed, clutching my purse like a shield. I woke up to the sound of tape ripping. Sunlight was streaming through the dusty curtains. I sat up, disoriented. The front door was open. I saw movement on the porch. I scrambled up and ran to the door. Avery was out there. She was stacking cardboard boxes near the steps. Graham was standing by the driveway, looking at his shoes, his hands deep in his pockets. "What is happening?" I yelled, stepping onto the porch. Avery turned. She was wearing sunglasses, hiding her eyes. "I packed your things," she said. "My things?" "The clothes from your bag, your toiletries, and a few books from your old room that I assumed you would want." "You went through my stuff?" I felt a wave of violation so intense it made me dizzy. "I am helping you move on," Avery said. "My lawyer advised that possession matters. If you stay here, you establish tenancy. I cannot allow that." "Avery, stop!" I shouted. A neighbor, Mrs. Gable, was walking her dog across the street. She stopped, staring at us. I saw the curtain twitch in the window next door. "Please, Avery," I said, lowering my voice, fighting the tears that were threatening to spill. Don't do this. Not like this. Avery didn't blink. She pointed to the boxes. You need to go. Lillian, the locks are being changed again at noon. If you are not gone, I will have to call the sheriff to remove a trespasser. And nobody wants that scene. I looked at Graham. Graham? I pleaded. Are you okay with this? Graham looked up. His face pained. He opened his mouth. But Avery cut him off. Graham supports me. Go inside and get your purse. Lillian. And then leave. I stood there for a long moment, the morning sun hot on my face. I looked at the house, the peeling white paint, the porch swing where Mom used to read to me. It felt like a stage set that had been struck. It wasn't real anymore. I walked inside, grabbed my purse from the couch, and walked back out. I didn't look at Avery. I picked up the boxes, one by one, and loaded them into the trunk of my rental car. My hands were steady now. The shock had shifted into something else. A cold, quiet, embarrassed panic. I got into the driver's seat. Avery was standing on the porch, arms crossed, watching me like a sentinel guarding a fortress. I reversed out of the driveway, avoiding Mrs. Gable's gaze, and drove down the street. I didn't know where I was going. I just drove. 10 minutes later, I pulled into the parking lot of a Rite Aid. I needed to think. I needed an ally. I pulled out my phone and scrolled until I found the name. Marla Kincaid. Marla was Dad's oldest friend. She had been the librarian at the high school where he taught. She was the one who had knit me a blanket when I was brought home from the adoption agency. If anyone knew the truth about Dad's wishes, it was Marla. She answered on the second ring. Lillian? Oh, honey, I heard. You heard? I asked, my voice cracking. Small town, she said softly. I heard Avery put you out. I am so sorry, Marla. What is going on? I asked. Avery says Dad put the house in a trust. She says I was never meant to inherit. Is that true? Did he tell you that? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Too long. Marla? Lillian, she said, her voice strained. I promised your mother I wouldn't interfere. She made me swear. Interfere in what? Marla. Please, I am in a parking lot with my life in cardboard boxes. I have nothing. I heard her take a shaky breath. Listen to me. Lillian, I cannot get involved. I can't. But did you ever see the basement utility room door open? What? I frowned. The utility room? No. Dad always kept it locked. He said the furnace was dangerous. Marla didn't say anything for a moment. Marla? It wasn't the furnace. She whispered, then the line went dead. I stared at the phone. I called her back, but it went straight to voicemail. I sat there in the Rite Aid parking lot, the air conditioner blasting against the sweat on my face. It wasn't the furnace, my grief, which had been a heavy, suffocating blanket for days, was suddenly gone. In its place was something sharper, something cold and jagged. Avery hadn't just kicked me out. She was hiding something. The files in the shredder, the secret meeting with the lawyer, the urgency to get me off the property, and now, the basement. I started the car. I couldn't go back to the house. Not yet. I didn't have the power or the legal standing, but I wasn't leaving Briar Glen. I drove out to Route 19, to the edge of town where the strip malls gave way to scrubby woods. I found the extended stay America, a beige block of a building that smelled of chlorine and desperation. I paid for a week up front with my credit card. Declining the receipt, I carried my boxes up to the second floor, past a maid cart, and a couple arguing in the hallway. The room was small, a kitchenette, a stiff bed, and a window that looked out over the highway. I put the boxes down and sat on the edge of the mattress. I took a deep breath. I was 33 years old. My parents were dead. My sister had stolen my inheritance and erased my history. I was alone. But as I looked at the blinking red light of the smoke detector above me, I realized something. Avery had made a mistake. She thought she was discarding a helpless, grief-stricken sister. She thought that by taking the house, she had taken my power. She was wrong. She had taken away the only thing I had to lose. I pulled out my laptop and set it on the tiny round table. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I was going to find out what was in that utility room. I was going to find out why my parents had lied to me. And I was going to take back my life. The Wi-Fi in the extended stay America was a fluctuating pulse that made my remote connection to the North Lake Mutual servers agonizingly slow. I sat at the wobbly round table in my room, surrounded by the beige indifference of corporate hospitality, trying to focus on a water damage claim from a flooded basement in Ohio. The irony was not lost on me. My own life was currently underwater. Yet here I was, calculating the depreciation value of someone else's drywall. I missed a detail. It was a small thing, a discrepancy in the contractor's invoice regarding the square footage of the affected area. Usually, I would have caught it in seconds. I was good at my job. I was precise. But today, my eyes kept sliding off the screen, drawn to the stack of legal pads where I had been frantically scribbling notes about inheritance law and property rights. My phone buzzed. It was Marcus, my manager. "Lillian, do you have a minute?" he asked. His voice was tight. I swallowed, pushing the claim aside. "Sure. Marcus, what is up?" "I'm looking at the queue," he said. "You are lagging behind on the triages. And that settlement you authorized yesterday for the fender bender in Chicago? Compliance flagged it. You missed the police report verification." I closed my eyes, pressing the heel of my hand against my forehead. "I am sorry. I will fix it right now. It has been a rough week. My father passed away, and the estate is—" "I know. Lillian," Marcus interrupted, and I could hear the genuine sympathy warring with corporate pressure in his tone. "I am really sorry for your loss. Honestly, but I have to be real with you. The quarterly numbers are coming down next week. There are rumors about restructuring. Layoffs are on the table for the remote teams." The word hung in the stale air of the motel room. Layoffs. "I need you to be invisible right now," Marcus said. "Invisible and perfect. Do not give them a reason to put your name on a list. Can you do that?" I looked at the water stain on the ceiling tile above me. I had less than $2,000 in my checking account. I was paying weekly rates at a motel. If I lost this job, I wouldn't just be homeless. I would be defenseless. "I can do it," I said, my voice steadying into a professional mask. "I will clear the queue by tonight." "Good. Take care of yourself. Lillian." I hung up and stared at the laptop. Fear, I was learning, was an excellent fuel source. It burned hotter than grief. I spent the next 6 hours working with a mechanical intensity, clearing claims, cross-referencing policies, and double-checking every single decimal point. I didn't stop to eat. I didn't stop to think about the empty house on Elm Street. I just worked until my eyes burned and my bank account felt, for the moment, slightly safer. The next morning, I drove into town to see Daniel Hawthorne. I didn't make an appointment. I knew that if I called, his receptionist, who was likely already charmed or bullied by Avery, would find a way to block me. I walked in at 9 o'clock sharp. Daniel was pouring coffee in the break room. He jumped when he saw me. "Lillian," he said, nearly spilling the dark liquid on his tie. "I didn't see you on the schedule. I need 5 minutes." "Daniel," I said, "without my sister." He hesitated, glancing toward his office door as if Avery might burst through it at any moment. Then he sighed, a long exhale of resignation, and nodded. "Come in." His office was exactly as it had been the day before, but the air felt different without Avery's commanding presence. It felt quieter, sadder. I sat in the leather chair, clutching my purse. "I want to know where things really stand," I said. "Not the version you gave when Avery was staring you down. The truth. Is there a will?" Daniel sat heavily behind his desk. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "There is no finalized, signed will from this year," he said. "The draft I was working on. Your father never came in to execute it. He was supposed to come in the Tuesday after he died." I felt a sharp pang in my chest. What was in the draft? Daniel shook his head. "It doesn't matter. Legally speaking, an unsigned draft is just paper. We have to go by the last valid will, which is from 12 years ago. The one where Avery is executor. I said, yes, and in that will, the estate is divided equally between you two. Then why is she kicking me out? I demanded. Why is she claiming the house is hers? Because of the trust, Daniel said quietly. He opened a file on his desk. Not the blue one Avery had brought, but a standard manila folder. 6 months ago, right after your mother passed, your father transferred the deed of the house into the Stewart Family Revocable Trust. Avery is the primary trustee, and the beneficiary? Daniel looked uncomfortable. The trust documents are complex. They grant the trustee broad discretion to manage the asset for the benefit of the family legacy. Avery is interpreting that to mean she has sole possessory rights to the residence to prevent financial dilution. Financial dilution, I repeated. That is lawyer speak for selling it? Or leveraging it? Daniel said. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. Lillian, Avery is moving very fast with the administration. She has already applied for a tax ID for the estate. She is consolidating accounts. It is aggressive, even for an executor. Can I stop her? Daniel put his glasses back on. Without proof of malfeasance? No. You can file a contest, but that takes months and a retainer of about $5,000 just to start. And if the trust is ironclad, you will lose. I stared at him. Malfeasance. That meant wrongdoing. She shredded documents. Daniel, she cleared the study before you even saw the paperwork. He winced. That is suspicious. But not proof. Executors have the right to organize records. I stood up. I felt trapped in a web of legalities that seemed designed to strip me of everything. Thank you. Daniel, I said, Lillian. He called out as I reached the door. Be careful. Estate fights. They get ugly. And Avery seems very determined to control the narrative. I walked out into the bright, humid morning. I needed to go back to the house, not to fight, but to salvage. I had left so fast I had forgotten the small things, my winter coat, the silver locket Mom gave me for my 30th birthday, and the wooden recipe box that sat on the kitchen counter. That box held the instructions for the apple pie we made every Thanksgiving. It was worthless to an appraiser, but it was the only inheritance I actually cared about. I parked my rental car on the street, 2 houses down. Just in case. The silver SUV was in the driveway. I walked up the path, my heart hammering against my ribs. I tried the front door, knowing it would be locked, and it was. I rang the bell. A minute passed. Then the door opened. Avery stood there. She wasn't wearing her funeral blacks anymore. She was in yoga pants and a t-shirt, looking jarringly casual in the house of mourning. I told you not to come back, she said. I just want my things. Avery, I left my coat, Mom's recipe box. We are taking inventory, she said, blocking the doorway with her body. You can't just come in and grab things. Everything has to be cataloged for the estate value. Mom's meatloaf recipe has no estate value. I snapped. Let me in. You are trespassing. Lillian. She stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind her but not latching it. She crossed her arms, looking down at me from the height of the step. You need to accept reality, she said. You are making this embarrassing. The neighbors are talking. Let them talk. I want to know why you are doing this. Why are you erasing me? I am not erasing you, she said, her voice dropping to a hiss. I am protecting this family. You have always been separate. You came to us with baggage. Lillian, you have always been a little unstable. And now, without Mom and Dad to smooth things over, it is just too much. Unstable? I laughed. A harsh, jagged sound. I am an insurance auditor. Avery, I am the most boringly stable person on earth. You are the one shredding documents in the dark. You don't belong here. Lillian, she said. The venom in her voice was so pure it was almost startling. You never did. You were a project, a charity case, and the charity stops now. She turned and went back inside, slamming the deadbolt home with a finality that echoed in my bones. I stood there, shaking. The cruelty was so precise, designed to hit the exact insecurity I had carried since I was 7 years old, and realized I didn't look like anyone in the family portraits. I turned to leave. Lillian. The voice came from the side of the house. I looked over. Graham was standing near the garage, hidden from the front door by a large rhododendron bush. He was holding a bag of trash, pretending to take it to the bin. "Graham," I said, walking over to him. "Can you believe her?" Graham looked terrified. He kept glancing at the house, his eyes darting to the windows. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. She is going through a lot," he whispered. He didn't believe it, and neither did I. "I need to get my stuff. Graham, please, I can't let you in," he said. "She took my keys. She checks them." He fumbled in the pocket of his shorts. His hand came out with a small brass key on a plain ring. It wasn't a house key. It looked like the key to the side door of the detached garage. "Take this," he said, pressing it into my palm. His hand was damp and trembling. "It is an old spare for the garage side door. She forgot about it." "Graham, what is going on?" I asked, clutching the cold metal. "Why is she doing this?" He looked at me, his eyes wet. I saw a depth of panic in him that chilled me. "She is trying to fix it," he said cryptically. "Fix what? Just don't come during the day. She is always watching." "Graham!" Avery's voice rang out from the front porch. He jumped as if he had been shot. "Coming!" he yelled back. He looked at me one last time. "I am sorry. Lillian, I am so sorry." He ran back toward the house. I closed my fist around the key and walked back to my car. I waited until 2 a.m. The drive from the motel to the house was a journey through a ghost town. The streets of Briar Glen were empty, the streetlights humming in the humidity. I parked 3 blocks away, in front of a vacant lot, and walked the rest of the way. I was dressed in black leggings and a dark hoodie, feeling ridiculous, like a cat burglar in my own childhood home. The house was dark. A single security light flooded the driveway, but the side of the garage was in shadow. I crept through the neighbor's hedge, the branches scratching my face, and reached the side door. I inserted Graham's key, for a second. I thought it wouldn't work. It was stiff. I applied gentle pressure, praying the rust would give way. With a soft click, the lock turned. I slipped inside and closed the door, waiting for my eyes to adjust. The garage smelled of gasoline, sawdust, and the peculiar, sharp scent of fertilizer. It was hot. The heat of the day trapped in the concrete. I clicked on the small flashlight I had bought at the gas station. The garage was Avery's staging area. The car, Dad's old Buick, was gone, likely sold already. In its place were rows of boxes. Furniture from the spare bedrooms was stacked against the wall, covered in plastic. I moved the beam of the flashlight over the plastic totes stacked on the workbench. Avery was organized. I would give her that. Kitchen, dishes, Dad's clothes, donate, living room, decor. I wasn't looking for dishes. I was looking for paper. I found them on the bottom shelf of a metal rack in the corner, hidden behind a stack of old tires. 2 heavy totes. Distinct from the others. Tax. 2019 to 2022. Home. Do not discard. My heart raced. I didn't want to steal valuables. I didn't want the silver or the jewelry. I wanted the truth. I grabbed the 2 totes. They were heavy, filled with dense paperwork. I stacked them, lifting them with a grunt. I couldn't carry anything else. I took one last look around, my light catching a tool chest that Dad used to let me organize. I slipped out the side door, locking it behind me. I carried the totes through the hedges, my arms burning, sweat trickling down my back. I reached my car, threw them in the trunk, and drove away without turning on my headlights until I hit the main road. Back at the motel, I dumped the contents of the home tote onto the bed. It was a chaotic mix of deeds, surveys, and warranties. But near the bottom, inside a plain manila folder, I found a document that made me freeze. It was a statement for a home equity line of credit, a HELOC. It was dated 14 months ago. The borrower listed was not my father. It was Avery Stewart, listed as a co-signer with Dad. I scanned the numbers. They had taken out $150,000 against the house. Why? Dad had a pension. The house was paid off years ago. Why would he leverage it? I dug deeper. Stapled to the back of the statement was a letter on thick, cream-colored paper. The letterhead read, Pine Hollow Capital. The address was a P.O. box in Philadelphia. The tone of the letter was polite but threatening. Dear Mr. Stewart, regarding the private lending agreement dated March 12, 2023, this is a reminder that the interest-only period expires on September 1st. Full repayment or refinancing is required to avoid collateral seizure protocols. Collateral seizure. The house. Someone had borrowed money. Private, hard money lending, not a standard bank loan. Against the house. Avery was on the HELOC. But this Pine Hollow debt seemed separate. Darker. I sat on the bed. The papers spread out around me like a map of a disaster. Avery wasn't just greedy. She was indebted. She wasn't selling the house to erase me. She was trying to outrun a foreclosure that nobody knew about. The next day, I called Marla Kincaid again. She didn't answer. I texted her. I know about the basement utility room. I know about Pine Hollow. Meet me at the diner on Main. Please. She was there when I arrived. Marla looked 10 years older than she had at the funeral. She was sitting in a booth at the back of the diner, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. She was wearing a raincoat, even though it was sunny. I sat down opposite her. She didn't look up. You shouldn't be digging. Lillian, she said softly. I found the papers. Marla, I know they borrowed money. I know Avery is involved. Marla looked up then. Her eyes were rimmed with red. Your mother was sick with worry, she said. The last year. It wasn't the cancer that killed her peace of mind. It was the house. She called it a trap. Why? I asked. Why would they borrow against it? It wasn't them. Marla whispered. It was Avery. She needed money. A lot of it. Something about a business deal that went wrong for Graham. Your father? He couldn't say no to her. You know how he was. He thought he could fix it. He signed the papers to help her get a loan, thinking it was temporary. And Pine Hollow? Marla shuddered. That came later. When the first loan wasn't enough, your father went to a private lender. He didn't tell your mother until it was done. He was trying to save Avery from, I don't know, jail, bankruptcy. I felt a cold fury rising in me. So Avery took the house to pay off the debt she created? Marla reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. There is one more thing, she said. Your mother made me promise not to tell you until you were ready. Until you were strong enough. I am ready. Marla, I am living in a motel and my sister is gaslighting me. Tell me. Marla looked around the diner to make sure no one was listening. Your adoption papers, she said. The original file. Your parents kept it in the safe in the study, but when Avery started having financial trouble, your mother moved it. She was terrified Avery would use it. Use it how? To prove you weren't a natural heir, Marla said. To cut you out if things got desperate. Your mother hid the file. She told me, if Avery ever tries to erase Lillian, tell her to look where the heat comes from. The utility room. I realized. The furnace. But I checked the utility room. I said, it was empty. Avery cleared it. Marla shook her head. Not in the room. Honey, inside the vent. The intake vent behind the old water heater. I sat back. The revelation settling over me. The papers were still there. Avery had missed them because she was too busy looking for money. I called Daniel Hawthorne immediately after leaving the diner. He sounded exhausted. Lillian, I told you, unless you have proof, I have proof of debt. I said, cutting him off, I have a HELOC statement with Avery's name on it. I have a letter from a predatory lender called Pine Hollow Capital threatening seizure. There was a silence on the line, then the rustle of paper. If Avery is encumbering the estate to pay personal debts, that is a breach of fiduciary duty, Daniel said, his voice sharpening. That changes things. I can bring you the papers. I said, bring them. But Lillian, listen to me. This is going to get expensive. We can file an injunction to freeze the estate assets. Basically locking the house down so she can't sell or refinance. But Avery will fight it. She will use estate funds to pay her lawyers. You will have to pay out of pocket. I have a job, I said, thinking of Marcus and the layoffs. I can manage. It could take months, Daniel warned. And if we freeze the assets, and the payments to this Pine Hollow group stop, they might foreclose. You could win the battle and lose the house anyway. I don't care about the house anymore, Daniel. I said, I care about the truth. That evening, I was heating up a microwave dinner in my room when my phone pinged. It was a notification from Facebook. I rarely checked it, but the preview showed my name. It was a post from my cousin. Sarah, please keep my cousin Avery in your prayers. She is dealing with so much after Uncle Ted's death, and now having to handle the legal threats from Lillian is just heartbreaking. It is so sad when greed tears families apart. We love you, Avery. I felt the blood drain from my face. I clicked the link. There were dozens of comments. I heard Lillian was demanding cash at the funeral. Adopted kids always have that attachment issue, don't they? Stay strong. Avery, you are the rock of that family. She was spinning the story. She was painting me as the villain, the greedy adoptee trying to steal the family home from the grieving biological daughter. She was isolating me, turning the entire town of Briar Glen into a fortress I couldn't breach. I threw my phone onto the bed. I felt a wave of nausea, followed by a crushing sense of loneliness. I was alone in a cheap motel, with a tenuous job, a dwindling bank account, and a family that had decided I was the enemy. But then I looked at the plastic tote on the floor. I looked at the key Graham had given me. Avery was loud. She was popular. She had the narrative. But I had the documents. She was fighting to hide her shame. I was fighting for my existence. I sat down at the table and opened my laptop. I wasn't going to respond to the Facebook post. I wasn't going to argue with cousins who didn't know the truth. I pulled up the spreadsheet I used for audits. I created a new file. Stewart Estate. Timeline of debt. If Avery wanted a war, she was going to get one, but I wasn't going to fight it with rumors. I was going to fight it with math. The extended stay America had become a financial hemorrhage I could no longer sustain. At $120 a night, it was bleeding my savings dry, and the smell of industrial cleaner was beginning to feel like the scent of my own failure. I needed a base of operations that didn't remind me every morning that I was transient. I found a room in Cedarfield, a quiet, leafy town 20 minutes north of Briar Glen. It was a second-floor bedroom in a craftsman bungalow owned by a woman named Tessa Lane. Tessa was an ER nurse who worked the night shift. She was 50, with graying hair chopped short and eyes that had seen enough trauma to have lost the capacity for petty judgment. When I moved in, carrying my 3 boxes and the stolen plastic totes, Tessa didn't ask why a 33-year-old woman was restarting her life with nothing but a laptop and a bag of clothes. She just pointed to the coffee maker. The rule is simple, Tessa said, leaning against her quartz countertop. I sleep from 8 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. If you make noise, I will be grumpy. If you burn the house down, I will be furious. Otherwise, we are good. It was the first time in 2 weeks that someone had spoken to me without an agenda. I built a routine. I woke up at 6, made coffee, and worked at a small desk by the window overlooking Tessa's overgrown garden. I logged into the North Lake Mutual server, processing claims with a mechanical efficiency that kept my mind from eating itself. At noon, I would drive to a park to eat a sandwich and read through the documents I had taken from the garage. At 4, when Tessa woke up, we would sometimes share a pot of tea. She became an anchor. She didn't offer platitudes. When I told her about Avery changing the locks, she didn't say, "She will come around." She said, "Grief makes people crazy, but greed makes them monsters. Watch your back." It was the validation I didn't know I was starving for. 2 weeks into my stay at Tessa's, Daniel Hawthorne called. His voice was tight. The professional veneer strained. We got a response from Avery's lawyer. He said, "I didn't know she had a lawyer." I said, putting my phone on speaker and setting it on the desk. She retained Bramble and Sloan. "They are a high-end firm out of Philadelphia. Aggressive litigators." Of course she did. Avery was bleeding money. Yet she was hiring the sharks. What did they say? "Daniel?" "They are offering a settlement," he said. I waited. The word settlement sounded civilized. It sounded like a resolution. "They are offering you $25,000, Daniel said. I let out a breath. 25,000. It was 5 times what she had offered in the kitchen. It was enough to get an apartment, maybe put a down payment on a small condo. But? I asked. I could hear the but in his silence. But there is a condition. Daniel said, "They want you to sign a waiver, a full release of all claims against the estate, the property, and the trust. And they want you to sign a document acknowledging that your adoption was a conditional placement that did not confer equal inheritance rights under the specific terms of the family trust." The room went cold. "She wants me to sign a paper saying I am not a real daughter?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Essentially, yes. They are framing it as a clarification of the trust's intent. If you sign, you get the check within 48 hours. If you don't, they are prepared to litigate the validity of your claim to the assets based on the language in the original adoption decree." I felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't just about money. This was an amputation. Avery was willing to pay $25,000 to legally codify that I was a second-class citizen. "Tell them to go to hell. Daniel, Lillian," Daniel said, his voice gentle. "I have to advise you, litigation will cost more than $25,000. You could win on principle and go bankrupt in practice. I don't care." I said, "I am not signing that. It is a lie. Mom and Dad never treated me like a conditional placement. They loved me." "I know," Daniel said. "I know they did. But Avery is betting that you are desperate enough to take the cash." "I am not that desperate," I said, though my hands were shaking. "File the disclosure request. I want to see everything. The bank statements, the trust documents, the debts. If she wants a fight, let's make it public." After I hung up, I couldn't go back to work. I sat on the floor with the home tote. I needed to find something, anything, that proved my parents hadn't planned this, that Avery was rewriting history, not just enforcing it. I started digging through a stack of old insurance papers I hadn't looked at closely yet. Most of it was mundane: car insurance renewals, house policies. But tucked inside a brochure for flood coverage was a document on thin carbon copy paper. It was a life insurance policy for my mother, a standard term life policy for $50,000. I scanned the details. The policy had been taken out 20 years ago. The primary beneficiary was my father. The contingent beneficiary, listed clearly in typewritten font, was Lillian Stewart and Avery Stewart. Equally, my heart jumped. $50,000. Split 2 ways. That was $25,000. That was my safety net. But then I saw the date on the stapled attachment. It was a change of beneficiary form. It was dated 4 months ago, 2 months before Mom died. The signature at the bottom was Mom's, but it looked shaky, weak. The pen pressure was uneven. The new beneficiary was not Avery. It was the Stewart Family Revocable Trust. And who controlled the trust? Avery. I stared at the paper. Why would Mom do that? She was lucid until the end. She wanted us to be taken care of. Why would she move the liquid cash into a trust that Avery controlled? Effectively locking me out? Unless she didn't. I held the paper up to the light. The date was written in a different ink than the signature. The signature was blue ballpoint. The date was black gel pen. It was possible Mom signed a blank form for something else, and it was filled in later. Or maybe Avery had guided her hand when she was too weak to argue. I felt a chill. This wasn't just unfair. This was fraud. I needed to clear my head. I logged back into work. Marcus had assigned me a new batch of files. High-priority audits for commercial liability. These were complex cases involving businesses that were being flagged for potential fraud or risk mismanagement. I opened the first file. It was a construction company in Ohio that was claiming bankruptcy after a warehouse fire. I started scrolling through their list of creditors, looking for the usual red flags: shell companies, offshore accounts. My eyes snagged on a name in the list of secured creditors: Pine Hollow Capital. I stopped breathing for a second. It was the same name, the same lender that had sent the threatening letter to my father. I clicked on the supporting documents for the construction company. There was a loan agreement from Pine Hollow. I read it, and as I read, the hair on my arm stood up. It was a predatory lending agreement. The interest rate was 18%, climbing to 30% upon default. But the kicker was the collateral clause. It didn't just secure the loan against the property, it secured it against all personal assets of the guarantor. It was a hard money loan designed to strip the borrower of everything if they missed a single payment. I did a quick search on the internal Northlake database for Pine Hollow Capital. It popped up in 3 other fraud investigations. In every case, the borrower had been desperate, the terms had been aggressive, and the assets had been seized quickly, often through quiet title actions or confessions of judgment that bypassed standard court proceedings. This wasn't a bank. This was a loan shark with a letterhead, and Avery had attached our childhood home to this monster. I grabbed my phone. I couldn't call as Lillian Stewart, the aggrieved sister. I had to call as someone else. I dialed the number on the letterhead I had found in the tote. It rang 4 times. Pine Hollow. A man answered. His voice was smooth, bored. "Hi," I said, pitching my voice into the brisk, professional tone I used with contractors. "This is Sarah from the Energetic Title Processing Department. I am verifying a lien position on a property in Briar Glen." "The Stewart estate?" I held my breath. "One moment," he said. I heard keys clacking. "Stewart on Elm Street?" "That is the one." I said, "I am seeing a satisfaction of the note, but I have a flag on the collateral status. Can you confirm if the deed is currently held in escrow?" It was a bluff. I was using buzzwords I had picked up from years of reading property claims. "We are holding the note," the man said. "But the collateral isn't standard. It is a dual-track security. We have a confession of judgment on file." "What does that mean for the timeline?" I asked, my hand gripping the pen so hard my knuckles turned white. "It means if they miss the balloon payment on the 1st. We don't have to foreclose," he said, sounding amused. "We just file the judgment and take the keys. The borrower knows the terms. She is skating on thin ice. Honestly, Okay, thanks," I said, and hung up. I sat there, staring at the wall. Confession of judgment. It was a legal nuclear option. It meant Avery had signed a document that essentially said, if I don't pay, I automatically lose the case. I waive my right to a trial. I waive my right to defense. She hadn't just borrowed money. She had put a gun to the head of the estate and handed Pine Hollow the trigger. I called Daniel immediately. When I explained what the man said, Daniel went silent. That is extremely dangerous. "Lillian," he said finally, "confessions of judgment are barely legal in Pennsylvania. They are heavily restricted. If she signed that, she must have been desperate or coerced." I said, "If Pine Hollow exercises that judgment, the house is gone," Daniel said. "Overnight, the probate court won't even have time to intervene. The trust won't matter. Your inheritance won't matter. We have to stop her." I said, "I can file an emergency injunction," Daniel said, "but I need more than a phone call. I need to show the court that the executor is mismanaging the estate to the point of imminent destruction. I will get you more," I said. 2 nights later, my phone rang at 11 o'clock. I was in bed, reading a book about property law that I had checked out from the library. The caller ID said, "Graham Voss." I stared at the screen. Graham never called me. He was Avery's shadow, her silent partner. I answered. "Graham? Lillian?" His voice was wet and thick. He sounded like he had been crying, or maybe drinking, probably both. "Graham, are you okay? I can't do it anymore." "Lil," he slurred. "The numbers don't work. They never work. Graham, where are you?" "I am in the garage," he said. "She is asleep. She sleeps like a baby." "How does she sleep?" "Graham, listen to me. I know about Pine Hollow." The line went silent. I could hear his breathing. Jagged, shallow gasps. "You know?" he whispered. "I know about the loan. I know about the confession of judgment. Graham, you guys are going to lose the house. We already lost it," he said, his voice breaking. "We lost it 2 years ago. We are just renting time." "What do you mean?" the investment. He sobbed. It was my fault. I thought I could double the money. I put everything into that crypto exchange. It was a scam. Lil, it was all gone in a week. Our savings, the retirement. And you went to Pine Hollow? Avery did. She said she would fix it. She said she wouldn't let me look like a failure. She went to your dad. She made him sign. Graham, why is she kicking me out? If the house is drowning in debt, why does she care if I'm there? Because of the sale, he said. He sounded exhausted. She has a buyer, a cash buyer. If she can sell it fast, before Pine Hollow calls the note, she can pay them off and maybe walk away with enough to start over. But she needs clear title. She needs you gone so you don't ask questions about where the equity went. He started weeping openly now. She is terrified. Lillian, she is paying them $4,000 a month just in interest. It never ends. If she loses the house, she loses everything. Her reputation, the legacy, me, Graham. I said firmly, you need to tell her to stop. You need to tell her I know. I can't, he whispered. She will kill me. She thinks she can win. She always thinks she can win. He hung up. I sat in the dark, my heart pounding. It wasn't hatred. It was survival. Avery was drowning, and she was using me as the ballast to keep herself afloat. She needed to erase me so she could sell the house out from under the debt before the whole town found out her husband had blown their fortune. I needed one more piece of the puzzle. Graham had mentioned clear title. The next morning, I took a half-day off work and drove to the county courthouse. The Records of Deeds office was in the basement, a room that smelled of old paper and dust. I went to the public terminals. I searched for Stewart, Avery and Stewart, Theodore. I found the usual things, the original deed, the transfer to the trust. But then I searched the pending filings bin. These were documents that had been submitted but not yet fully processed or had been rejected for clerical errors. I found a document labeled Draft, Action to Quiet Title. It was dated 3 weeks ago, 1 week after Dad died. A quiet title action is a lawsuit used to establish ownership of a property when there are disagreements or clouds on the title. It is usually used to clear up boundary disputes or old liens, but Avery was using it to clear me. The draft listed Lillian Stewart as a defendant. The claim argued that my adoption was never fully formalized regarding estate rights due to a clerical error in 1995, a blatant lie, and that my claim to the property was invalid. She was preparing to sue me before I even knew I had to fight, but the document had a stamp on it. Rejected. Insufficient evidence of service. She had tried to file it. She had tried to legally erase me while I was still sleeping on her couch. The court had kicked it back because she hadn't notified me. That was why she needed the waiver. That was why she offered the money. She couldn't get the quiet title through the court without alerting me. So she tried to buy my signature instead. I printed the document. The pages were warm in my hands. I walked out of the courthouse and sat on a bench in the square. The sun was shining. People were walking their dogs. Life was moving on. But I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. I realized something then. My fear changed. For the last month, I had been afraid of being homeless. I had been afraid of being poor. I had been afraid of the shame of being unwanted. But as I looked at the legal draft where my sister had tried to argue that my adoption was a clerical error, I realized I was dealing with something much more dangerous than greed. Avery was cornered. She was paying $4,000 a month to loan sharks. She was carrying the weight of her husband's failure and the potential destruction of the Stewart name. She was sleepwalking through a nightmare, and she had convinced herself that I was the only thing standing between her and salvation. Cornered animals bite. Cornered animals kill. I looked at the document again. The goal wasn't to get the house back anymore. The house was poisoned. It was leveraged to the hilt, tied to criminals, and soaked in Graham's guilt and Avery's lies. If I won the house, I would just win the debt. No, I didn't want the house. I wanted the truth. I wanted to drag the Pine Hollow loan, the confession of judgment, the redirected life insurance, and this quiet title action into the light, I wanted to strip Avery of the one thing she valued more than money, her control over the story. She had spent her whole life making me feel like an imposter, like a footnote in the Stewart family history. I was going to prove that I was the only one who had actually tried to save the legacy. While she was busy selling it off for parts, I drove back to Tessa's house. I felt calm. It was a cold, hard calm. Tessa was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables. She looked up when I walked in. "You look different," she said. "I am different," I said. I put the stack of papers on the island. The quiet title draft, the Pine Hollow notes, the life insurance change. "I am not taking the settlement," I said. "Good," Tessa said. She put down the knife. "So, what is the plan?" "I am going to burn it down," I said. "Not the house, the lie." I called Daniel. "File the emergency motion," I said. "Use the confession of judgment. Use the quiet title draft. Attach the redirected insurance policy." "Lillian," Daniel said, sounding wary, "this is going to be a declaration of war. If we file this, it becomes public record. Everyone will see it. The debt, the accusations. It will humiliate her." "I know," I said. "She might retaliate." He warned. "She already has." "Daniel, she stole my history. She tried to erase my identity. I am just returning the favor." I hung up. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, listening to the wind in the trees. I thought about Avery. I remembered a time when we were kids, before the resentment calcified. We were in the backyard, catching fireflies. I had fallen and scraped my knee, and Avery had been the one to run for the Band-Aids. She had held my hand while Mom cleaned it. "It's okay. Lily," she had said, "I got you." I rolled over, burying my face in the pillow. I grieved for that sister. She was gone. The woman in the house on Elm Street was a stranger made of fear and debt, and tomorrow I was going to introduce her to the consequences of her actions. The conference room at the Westbridge Mediation Center was painted a soothing, non-confrontational shade of sage green. It was designed to lower blood pressure, but as I sat across the oval table from my sister, I could feel my pulse throbbing in my neck. Daniel sat beside me, his briefcase open, a fortress of manila folders built between us and the opposition. On the other side sat Avery, flanked by her new attorney, a man named Marcus Sloan who wore a suit that cost more than my car and checked his watch 3 times in the first 5 minutes. Avery looked devastatingly fragile. She was wearing a simple black dress, high-necked and modest, with a single strand of pearls, Mom's pearls. She had minimal makeup on, just enough to highlight the shadows under her eyes. She held a tissue in one hand, twisting it periodically. To the mediator, a soft-spoken woman named Mrs. Albright, Avery looked like a grieving daughter trying to hold her family together. To me, she looked like a shark sensing blood in the water. "I am just trying to do what is right," Avery said, her voice trembling slightly. Her eyes were wet. "It has been so hard. Mrs. Albright, losing both parents so close together it breaks you. And now, to be dragged into this hostility? It is the last thing Dad would have wanted." Mrs. Albright nodded sympathetically, making a note on her legal pad. "I understand. Ms. Stewart, these transitions are incredibly difficult, but we are here to discuss the distribution of assets and the contested status of the real estate." Avery sniffed, dabbing at her nose. "There shouldn't be a contest. That is what hurts the most. My parents were clear. The house on Elm Street has been in the Stewart bloodline for 100 years. It was never a question." She looked at me then, and for a fleeting second, the sorrow in her eyes hardened into something sharp and dismissive. "Lillian knows this," Avery continued, turning back to the mediator. "We have always been honest with her. We took her in when she was a baby, and we gave her a wonderful life. We gave her a name. We gave her a home. But my parents always intended for the ancestral property to stay with the biological line. It is not about love. It is about continuity." I felt a physical sickness rise in my throat. We took her in. She was framing my adoption as an act of charity. a long-term favor that had finally expired. She was erasing my status as a daughter and replacing it with the status of a permanent guest who had overstayed her welcome. Daniel leaned forward. Ms. Stewart, with all due respect, the law in Pennsylvania does not distinguish between biological and adopted children regarding intestate succession or standard will interpretation unless explicitly stated. The document you are relying on is a handwritten note, not a testamentary instrument. Avery's lawyer, Sloan, waved a hand dismissively. We are not here to litigate the statute, Daniel. We are here to reach a settlement. Avery is generously offering $25,000 to help Lillian transition. Given that Lillian has no legal claim to the trust, this is a gift. It is hush money. I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. Avery flinched. Lillian, please, she whispered. Don't be like this. I am not being like anything. Avery, I said, I am just listening to you rewrite 40 years of our lives. You talk about the house like it is a holy relic. You talk about continuity and protecting the legacy. I leaned forward, ignoring Daniel's subtle hand on my arm warning me to be careful. If the house is so sacred, Avery, why is your name on the correspondence with Pine Hollow Capital? The room went dead silent. The air conditioner hummed. Mrs. Albright looked up from her notes. Sloan frowned, looking at his client. Avery froze. The tissue in her hand stopped moving. The fragility vanished, replaced by a sudden, rigid tension. Her eyes darted to her lawyer, then back to me. I don't know what you are talking about, she said. Her voice was higher than before. Brittle, Pine Hollow Capital. I repeated, keeping my eyes locked on hers. The private lenders in Philadelphia, the ones who charge 18% interest. I saw the letter. Avery, I saw the foreclosure threat. You are not protecting the house for the bloodline. You are leveraging it to pay off a debt that you and Graham are hiding. Avery's face turned a blotchy, furious red. The mask didn't just slip, it shattered. She slammed her hand down on the table. How dare you, she hissed. You have been snooping? You have been digging through my private financial records? It is estate property, Daniel interjected calmly. As a potential beneficiary, Lillian has a right to know if the assets are encumbered. She is crazy, Avery shouted. Turning to the mediator, she pointed a shaking finger at me. You see? This is what I'm dealing with. She is unstable. She has been unstable since Mom died. She was in therapy for months. She is paranoid. She is inventing conspiracies because she can't accept that she was cut out of the will. She looked at Sloan, desperate. Marcus, tell them. She is mentally unwell. We can't negotiate with someone who is delusional. I felt a cold calm settle over me. She was using my grief counseling, the therapy I sought after losing our mother, as a weapon to paint me as unreliable. It was low, even for her. I am not the one paying $4,000 a month to a loan shark. Avery, I said. Daniel stood up. We are requesting a full financial disclosure of all estate assets and liabilities, including any liens placed on the property in the last 24 months, if there is a confession of judgment filed against the house. We need to know immediately. Avery stood up so fast her chair tipped backward and hit the wall with a loud crash. We are done here, she said, grabbing her purse. I am not going to be interrogated by her. She looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. You are ruining everything, she whispered, just like you always do. She stormed out of the room. Sloan gathered his papers, looking annoyed and slightly confused, and followed her without a word. Mrs. Albright looked at me, her eyes wide. Well, she said, adjusting her glasses, I suppose we will not be settling today. I drove back to Cedarfield in a daze. The adrenaline from the confrontation was fading, leaving me exhausted. I had won the skirmish, but I knew the war was about to get much darker. Avery wasn't just angry anymore. She was exposed. I stopped at a grocery store to buy a rotisserie chicken for dinner with Tessa. I wanted to celebrate. In a small way, I wanted to believe that the truth was enough. I pulled up to Tessa's bungalow around 6 o'clock. The sun was setting. casting long shadows across the lawn. I saw it as soon as I walked up the porch steps. The front door was ajar, not wide open, just cracked an inch. The deadbolt clearly disengaged. Tessa never left the door unlocked. She was an ER nurse. She knew better than anyone what kind of people were out there. "Tessa?" I called out, pushing the door open. The house was silent. I dropped the grocery bag. The rotisserie chicken rolled across the floorboards. I ran up the stairs to my room. My door was open. I had left it closed. I stepped inside and stopped. The room hadn't been ransacked. The bed was made. My clothes were still in the closet. My laptop was sitting on the desk, exactly where I had left it, but the spot on the floor next to the dresser was empty. The plastic tote, the one labeled home, do not discard. It was gone. I spun around, checking the closet, under the bed, nothing. The other tote, the one with the tax returns, was still there. My jewelry box on the dresser was untouched. My laptop, worth $1,000, was sitting right there. Whoever had been here didn't want money. They wanted the evidence. I felt a scream build in my chest, but I swallowed it down. Panic wouldn't help. I went downstairs. Tessa was just walking in the back door, wearing her scrubs, looking tired. She saw the groceries on the floor and my pale face. "Lillian? What happened?" "Someone was here," I said. My voice sounded hollow. "They took the papers." Tessa didn't ask questions. She dropped her bag and went straight to the phone. "I am calling the police. Don't touch anything else." The police officer, a young man named Miller, was polite but pragmatic. He walked through the house, taking notes. "There is no sign of forced entry," he said, shining his flashlight on the front lock. "You said the door was ajar?" "Yes," I said, "and the tote is gone." "Was there anything of value in it?" Miller asked. "Cash? Bonds?" "No," I said, "just documents, old deeds, loan statements, evidence for a civil dispute I'm having with my sister." Miller sighed, closing his notebook. "Ma'am, without forced entry and without anything of monetary value being taken, this is hard to classify as a burglary. It looks like a civil matter spilling over. Do you have cameras?" "No," Tessa said. "I have been meaning to get a Ring doorbell." "But," Miller shrugged. "Look, I will file the report, but unless you can prove someone broke in, or you find the items in someone's possession, there is not much we can do. It is your word against, well, whoever took it. He left us with a case number on a small card." I sat at Tessa's kitchen table, staring at the card. It was Avery, or Graham, or someone they paid. They knew I was staying here. Briar Glen was small, and gossip traveled fast. Avery must have followed me. Or maybe Graham had tracked the license plate of my rental car. They walked in, maybe picking the lock, maybe using a credit card on the old latch. And they took the one thing that could destroy them. They left the laptop because stealing a computer is a felony that gets investigated. Stealing a box of old papers is a dispute. It was smart. It was terrifying. I realized then that I wasn't just fighting a legal battle. I was being hunted. I was being watched. I barely slept that night. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like footsteps. The next morning, I made a decision. I couldn't hide, and I couldn't stop. But I had to protect my flank. I logged into Northlake Mutual at 8 o'clock. I requested a video call with Marcus. He looked stressed when he answered. His tie was loosened, and he had dark circles under his eyes. "Lillian, I hope you have good news on the audit," he said. "I do." I said, "I am 70% through the construction files. But Marcus, I need to be honest with you." I took a breath. I couldn't tell him about the stolen papers or the loan sharks. It was too messy. Corporate managers didn't want soap operas. They wanted reliability. "I am dealing with a contested estate situation regarding my parents." I said, "It has become litigious. There are lawyers involved, and I might need to step out for court filings or meetings occasionally." Marcus rubbed his face. "Lillian, I told you, we are on the edge here." "I know," I said quickly. "That is why I'm telling you. I am not asking for time off. I am asking for flexibility. I will work nights. I will work weekends. I will finish the audit 3 days ahead of schedule. But I need you to know that if I am offline at 2 in the afternoon, I will be online at 2 in the morning. I am not flaking. I am fighting for my life here." He looked at me for a long moment. He saw the desperation in my eyes, but he also saw the resolve. "Finish the audit by Friday," he said. "If the quality is perfect, I don't care when you log the hours. Just don't make me regret this." "I won't. Thank you." "Marcus." I ended the call and threw myself into the work. I audited files like a machine. I needed the paycheck. If I lost my job, I lost my ability to pay Daniel. If I couldn't pay Daniel, Avery won. It was that simple. 2 days passed. I heard nothing from Avery. She was likely celebrating, thinking she had declawed me by stealing the tote. She didn't know I had scanned the Pine Hollow letter onto my hard drive. She didn't know I had a digital backup. But digital copies were one thing. Originals were another. Then, Marla called. "Meet me at the library," she whispered. The reference section in the back. Now, I found her tucked away in a corner of the Briar Glen Public Library, hidden behind a stack of biographies. She looked nervous, constantly checking the door. I heard about the break-in. She said as soon as I sat down, "Tessa told me. They took the papers." "Marla," I said, "they know I'm coming for them." Marla nodded. She reached into her oversized purse. "Your mother knew this might happen." She said, "She knew Avery had a darkness in her when she was backed into a corner." She pulled out a thick, sealed envelope. It was yellowed with age, or maybe just from being carried around in Marla's bag for months. On the front, in Mom's distinctive cursive, it read, "For Lillian. Open only if necessary." "I promised her," Marla said, her voice shaking. "She gave this to me 2 weeks before she died." She said, "If Avery tries to erase her, give her this. If they just fight over the china, burn it. But if Avery tries to say Lillian isn't mine, give it to her." I took the envelope. My hands were trembling. I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of stationery and a small silver key. I read the letter. "My dearest Lillian, if you are reading this, my heart breaks, because it means the family has fractured in the way I feared most. I love Avery, but I know she struggles with jealousy, and I know she has made mistakes with money that your father tried too hard to fix. I cannot control what happens after I'm gone, but I can make sure you are not defenseless. Your father and I signed papers years ago to protect you, but we were never sure if they were filed correctly at the courthouse. The records office can be messy. So, I kept a copy, a true copy, not in the house. The house is not safe anymore. Go to Riverstone Community Bank. Box number 402. This key will open it. The box is in your name and mine. I added you to the signature card 3 years ago when we went to lunch that day. You might not remember signing the little blue card, but you did. Inside is the truth. Do not let her take your place in this world. I love you, my daughter, always. Mom." I pressed the letter to my chest, closing my eyes to stop the tears. She had known. She had seen the storm coming even from her deathbed, and she had built me a lifeboat. I stood up. "Thank you, Marla." "Go," Marla said. "And Lillian? Don't let her win." I called Daniel from the car. "Meet me at Riverstone Community Bank. Now." Riverstone was a small brick bank on the edge of town, the kind with a calendar of antique cars on the wall and tellers who gave lollipops to kids. Daniel met me in the lobby. He looked anxious. "This is a long shot." "Lillian," he said, "if the box is in your mother's name, we might need probate letters to access it." "Read the letter," I said, handing it to him. He scanned it. "She added you to the card?" 3 years ago. I remember now. We were running errands. She said she needed to update some paperwork and had me sign a signature card. I didn't even look at what it was. I thought it was for her checking account. We walked to the desk. The teller, a woman named Janice, took my ID and the key. She checked the computer. "Yes, Lillian Stewart. You are a listed co-owner on Box 402. She led us into the vault. It was cool and smelled of steel and money. She slid the long box out of the wall and carried it to a small private room. She set it on the table and left us alone. I looked at Daniel. He nodded. I put the key in the lock. It turned with a smooth, heavy click. I lifted the lid. Inside, there was no jewelry, no cash, just a thick stack of documents bound with a rubber band. I pulled them out. On top was a certified copy of my adoption decree, stamped and notarized in 1995. Indisputable proof of my legal status. Beneath that was the original life insurance policy, the one before the change, along with a letter from Mom to the insurance company dated 3 months ago, explicitly stating that she did not authorize any changes to the beneficiary and was concerned about coercion. She had never mailed it, but she had notarized it. It was proof of her state of mind. But the document at the bottom was the one that made Daniel gasp. It was a legal agreement, drafted by a different law firm in Philadelphia. It was titled Debt Assumption and Equity Release Agreement. It was signed by Avery Stewart and Theodore Stewart. It was dated 2 years ago. I read the first paragraph, and the world tilted on its axis. I, Avery Stewart, acknowledge that I have received a personal loan of $200,000 from Theodore and Eleanor Stewart, secured by the equity in the family home at 12 Elm Street. In exchange for this loan, and to prevent foreclosure due to my external debts with Pine Hollow Capital, I hereby agree that my inheritance interest in the real property is considered prepaid in full. Upon the death of the parents, the remaining equity in the property shall pass solely to Lillian Stewart. Daniel grabbed the paper. My God. He whispered, "This isn't just a will. This is a contract for value received. What does it mean?" I asked. "It means Avery doesn't own the house," Daniel said, looking up at me with wide eyes. "She already sold her half to your parents to pay her debts. She cashed out 2 years ago." He tapped the paper. "She isn't the heir. Lillian, she is just a tenant. The house is yours. All of it." I stared at the document. Avery had known, all this time. She had been fighting not to keep her inheritance, but to hide the fact that she had already squandered it. She wasn't protecting the legacy. She was covering up a robbery she had committed against her own parents while they were still alive. I felt the fear evaporate, replaced by a cold, steely resolve. "We have her," I said. Daniel nodded, a grim smile spreading across his face. "We have her." The air in the private viewing room of Riverstone Community Bank was cool, filtered, and smelled faintly of floor wax. But as I read the letter in my hands, I felt as though I were standing in the center of a burning building. Daniel sat across from me, his hands clasped on the table, watching my face. He had already reviewed the legal contract, the debt assumption and equity release, which proved Avery had essentially sold her birthright years ago. But I was reading something far more personal. I was reading the voice of my dead parents. The letter was handwritten on Mom's stationery, the cream-colored kind she kept in the top drawer of the secretary desk. The handwriting shifted halfway through, from Mom's elegant, looping cursive to Dad's blocky, hurried print, suggesting they had written it together, perhaps late at night, passing the pen back and forth like a lifeline. "My dearest Lillian," it began. "We are writing this because we are afraid, not of death, which comes for us all, but of the mess we are leaving behind. We have tried to be fair parents. We have tried to love you both equally, but we have learned, too late, that fairness does not mean treating 2 people the same when one of them is drowning." I swallowed hard, my eyes scanning the lines. You know that Avery has always wanted more than what was there. She has a hunger in her, Lillian, a need to be seen as successful, wealthy, important. We thought it was just ambition. We were wrong. It was an addiction to approval, and she funded it with money she did not have. 3 years ago, Avery came to us. She was in trouble, real trouble. She had leveraged herself into a corner with people who do not follow the law. She begged us for help. She said she would go to jail. Or worse, your father. You know your father. He could not watch his child sink. He co-signed a loan. He thought it was a bridge to get her to safety. Instead, it became a chain around our necks. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. hot and fast. Dad. He had looked so tired the last few years. I had thought it was just age. It was this. He had been carrying the weight of a secret debt, a chain forged by his own daughter's greed. We made her sign the agreement you found in this box. The letter continued in Dad's handwriting. We told her that this loan was her inheritance. We told her that by saving her then, we were giving her everything we could, and that the house, the physical house, would go to you. She agreed. She cried and thanked us and signed the papers. We thought it was settled. But we see how she looks at you. Lillian, we see the resentment. We fear that when we are gone, she will try to bury this agreement. She will try to use your adoption against you because it is the only weapon she has left. If you are reading this, she has done exactly that. Please forgive us for not being strong enough to stop her while we were alive. Fight for yourself. Lillian, you are not the outsider. You are the one who stayed true. I lowered the paper. My hands were shaking so badly the letter rattled against the table surface. Lillian? Daniel asked softly. She knew. I whispered. Mom knew. She knew Avery would try to erase me. Daniel reached over and tapped the third document in the pile. The notarized memo. This is the nail in the coffin. Lillian, this memo outlines the specific payments your father was making to Pine Hollow Capital on Avery's behalf. It proves that the estate's liquidity was drained to service her debt before probate even started. He flipped the page. And here's the kicker. This debt? It predates the mortgage payoff. Your father didn't just co-sign a loan. He used the house as collateral for a commercial line of credit for a business entity called Voss Ventures. Graham. I said, that is Graham's shell company. Daniel nodded grimly. Avery and Graham borrowed against the house to fund a business. The business failed. Your parents stepped in to stop the foreclosure, agreeing to service the debt if Avery relinquished her claim to the house. She took the deal. Lillian, she spent her inheritance 5 years ago. She isn't fighting for the house because she thinks she deserves it. I said, the realization settling in like cold concrete in my stomach. She is fighting for it because if she loses the title, she can't refinance. And if she can't refinance, she can't pay off the principal she still owes. She is robbing Peter to pay Paul. Daniel said, and you are Peter. I gathered the papers. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. The crushing weight of the last month, the eviction, the humiliation, the shame of being told I didn't belong, was gone. In its place was a white-hot clarity. Avery hadn't kicked me out because I was adopted. She had kicked me out because I was the witness to her crime. We are going to file this. I said, we will, Daniel said. But Lillian, once this enters the public record, there is no going back. This outlines fraud, elder financial abuse, and potentially grand larceny. Avery won't just lose the house. She could face criminal charges. The community will know everything. I looked at the signature on the bottom of the letter. Love, Mom and Dad. She made her choice. Daniel. She chose money over family. I am just filing the paperwork. We left the bank. The sunlight outside felt abrasive, too bright for the dark truths I was carrying. I walked to my car, clutching the folder against my chest. I needed to see Graham. Avery was the architect, but Graham was the builder. He was the weak link. I had heard it in his voice on the phone. I didn't call him. I knew his routine. Graham did the grocery shopping on Tuesdays at 4 o'clock because Avery thought domestic tasks were beneath her. And she claimed he needed to make himself useful, since he wasn't bringing in a paycheck. I drove to the Giant Eagle on Route 19. I parked in the back row and waited. At 4:15, Graham's sedan pulled in. He looked terrible. He was wearing sweatpants and a stained polo shirt, and he walked with a stoop, as if gravity were pulling him harder than everyone else. I waited until he came out with a cart full of bags. As he was unlocking his trunk, I stepped out of my car and walked up behind him. Hello, Graham. He jumped, dropping a jug of milk. It hit the pavement with a wet thud, splitting open and pooling white liquid around his sneakers. Lillian, he gasped. He looked around wildly, as if expecting Avery to materialize from the asphalt. You shouldn't be here. If she sees you, she isn't here. Graham, and I don't care if she sees me. I stepped closer, avoiding the puddle of milk. I went to the bank today. Graham. I opened the box. His face went gray. All the blood drained out of him, leaving him looking like a paper mache doll left out in the rain. Oh, God. He whispered. You found the agreement. I found everything. The debt assumption, the letter from Mom, the record of the payments to Voss Ventures. Graham leaned against the car, sliding down until he was sitting on the bumper. He put his head in his hands. It wasn't supposed to be like this. He sobbed. It was supposed to be a sure thing. What was? I asked. The investment? He nodded into his hands. Crypto. Some guy Avery met at a seminar in Philadelphia. He said he had an algorithm. He said we could double our money in 3 months. Avery wanted to prove to your dad that she could build something on her own. She wanted to be the success story. So you bet the house? We bet everything, he said, looking up with tear-streaked eyes. We took out the loans. We gave the guy $200,000. And then poof, he vanished. The website went down. The numbers disappeared. And instead of going to the police, you went to my parents. Avery wouldn't let me go to the police. Graham said. She said it would be humiliating. She said everyone in Briar Glen would laugh at us. So she went to your dad. She cried. She told him it was a business misunderstanding. She made him co-sign the bailout loan to keep the sharks away. And the sharks are Pine Hollow? Graham shuddered. They are not a bank. Lillian, they are bad people. They call the house at 3 a.m. They sent photos of you to Avery's phone. I froze. Photos of me? Taken from a distance, Graham said, leaving work, walking into the motel. They told Avery that if the payments stopped, they wouldn't just take the house. They would take collateral measures. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. That explained the desperation. It explained the quiet title action. Avery was trying to sell the house to pay off dangerous men who were threatening her family. But she hadn't protected me. She had thrown me to the wolves. She had kicked me out of the house, isolating me, leaving me vulnerable. All while she tried to liquidate the only asset that could save her. She sold me out. Graham, I said quietly. She put me on the street to cover her bad bet. She was scared. Graham pleaded. I am scared too. Graham, I shouted, and he flinched. I am scared because my sister is a criminal and she is gaslighting the entire town into thinking I am the problem. I turned to walk away. Lillian, Graham called out. What are you going to do? I stopped and looked back at him. He looked pathetic, sitting in a puddle of milk in a grocery store parking lot. I am going to finish it, I said. I drove back to Tessa's house. I needed to shower. I felt dirty, covered in the grime of my family's secrets. I was drying my hair when my phone rang. It was Avery. I stared at the screen. I hadn't spoken to her since the mediation, where she had stormed out like a victim. I answered. Hello, Avery, Lillian, she said. Her voice was different. It wasn't the imperious executor voice, and it wasn't the fake grieving sister voice. It was soft, almost childlike. Can you come over? She asked. Why? I want to talk, she said. No lawyers, no Graham, just us, like sisters. Please, Lillian, I am tired. I hesitated. My instinct was to say no. My instinct was to let Daniel handle it, but the letter from Mom was burning a hole in my mind. Fight for yourself. I will be there in 20 minutes, I said. The house on Elm Street was dark when I arrived, except for the light in the kitchen. I walked up the path, past the spot where Avery had stacked my boxes 2 weeks ago. The rhododendron bush where Graham had given me the key was rustling in the wind. I let myself in. The locks hadn't been changed again, or maybe I just still had the right to be there. Avery was sitting at the kitchen table, the same table where we used to do homework, the same table where she had offered me the envelope of cash. She had a bottle of wine open, but only 1 glass. She looked small. Sit down, she said. I sat. I didn't take off my coat. I know you went to the bank. She said, Graham told me. He called me, crying. He told me everything. Avery, the investment. The scam. The loan Dad co-signed. Avery swirled the wine in her glass. She didn't look at me. Dad was a fool. She said softly. He was so soft. He always thought he could fix things with a check. He was trying to save you. I said, he mortgaged his peace of mind to keep you out of jail. I wasn't going to jail. Lillian, it was a civil matter. It was fraud. I snapped. And you know it. She looked up then. Her eyes were hard, dry. I have a buyer, she said, a developer from Pittsburgh. He is offering $400,000 cash. We close in 10 days. I stared at her. You can't sell the house. Avery, you don't own it. You signed it away 2 years ago. She waved her hand as if shooing a fly. That paper? That was just to calm Mom down. It doesn't mean anything. I am the executor. I have the power of sale. The court will stop you. Not if you stop the court, she said. She reached under the table and pulled out a large manila envelope. She slid it across the table. Open it. I didn't touch it. What is it? It is a check, she said, for $100,000. I looked at the envelope, then at her. Where did you get $100,000? Avery? You are broke. You are borrowing from loan sharks. I borrowed a little more, she said, her voice tight. To fix this. To fix us. She leaned forward. Take the money. Lillian, $100,000. That is a down payment on a house. That is a new car. That is freedom. All you have to do is tell Daniel to withdraw the motion. Tell him we settled. Sign the waiver. You are trying to bribe me with money you borrowed against a house you don't own? I asked, incredulous. It is not a bribe, she shouted, slamming her hand on the table. It is a share. It is me being generous. Generous? I stood up. You stole my inheritance. You stole my history. You told everyone I was a charity case. And now you want me to be an accomplice to your fraud? I am trying to save us, she screamed, standing up to meet me. You don't understand. Lillian, you don't understand who I owe. These people, they don't sue. They break things. They hurt people. If I don't sell this house, I am dead. Do you understand? Dead. Her face was twisted in a mask of sheer terror. For the first time, I believed her. She was terrified, but she was also selfish. You should have thought of that before you leveraged Dad's life for your vanity. I said, I turned to go. Lillian, wait, she begged, grabbing my arm. Her grip was painful. Please, I am your sister. Doesn't that mean anything? We are family. Blood is thicker than water. Lillian, you have to help me. I looked down at her hand on my sleeve. I remembered the funeral. I remembered her telling the cousins I was the adopted one. I remembered the locks changing. I pulled my arm away. You don't get to play the family card now. Avery, I said, my voice shaking with rage. You don't get to tell everyone I am not real family when it suits you, and then beg for sisterhood when you need an accomplice. I took a step back, looking her in the eye. And you don't get to make my adoption a crime scene to cover your shame. Avery's face changed. The desperation evaporated, replaced by something cold and ugly. It was the look of someone who had been unmasked and hated the person who did it. You ungrateful little brat, she hissed. We should have left you at the agency. The words hung in the air, vibrating. It was the truth she had been holding back for 30 years. I nodded slowly. Maybe, I said, but you didn't. And now, I am the only one left standing. I walked out. I heard the sound of glass shattering behind me. She had thrown the wine bottle against the wall. I didn't flinch. I walked to my car, got in, and locked the doors. I drove straight to Cedarfield. I called Daniel from the road. File it. I said, Lillian, are you sure? Daniel asked. It is 8 o'clock at night. I can file the emergency motion electronically, and it will hit the docket first thing in the morning. But once I hit send, file it. Daniel, include the debt assumption, include the letter, include the Pine Hollow threats. Burn it all down. Okay, he said. It is done. I hung up. I felt lightheaded. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard they hurt. When I got to Tessa's, she was waiting on the porch swing. She had a mug of tea in her hand. "You look like you just walked out of a car wreck," she said. "I feel like I caused one," I said, sinking onto the swing beside her. I told her everything: the meeting, the bribe, the things Avery said. Tessa listened, rocking the swing gently. The night crickets were singing in the tall grass. "I am going to destroy her. Tessa," I whispered, "the court filing. It will expose everything: the fraud, the debts, the lies. She will be humiliated. She might go to prison. Graham will certainly go to prison." I looked at my hands. "I remember when we were little." I said, "I was 5. I had a nightmare. Avery climbed into my bed and held me until I fell asleep. She wasn't always like this." "No," Tessa said softly. "People aren't born monsters. They are made, usually by fear." "I am ruining her life," I said. "I am the little sister. I am supposed to look up to her." Tessa set her tea down. She turned to me, her face stern in the porch light. "Lillian, look at me." I looked at her. "She tried to erase you," Tessa said. "She tried to steal your home. She endangered your life with loan sharks. She used your adoption, the very thing that made you family, as a weapon to cut you out." Tessa took my hand. "You are not destroying her. Lillian, she destroyed herself the minute she signed that paper and lied to your father. She built a house of cards on a foundation of dynamite. All you are doing is refusing to be inside when it blows up. You are refusing to be destroyed." She repeated, "There is a difference." I nodded, the tears finally coming. I let them fall. I cried for the sister I had lost years ago, long before the funeral. I cried for the parents who had tried so hard to protect us both and failed. And then, I dried my eyes. The motion would be on the judge's desk at 9 a.m. The war was over. The only thing left was the blast radius. The Cedarfield County Courthouse was a building designed to intimidate. It was all heavy stone and echoing marble, a place where footsteps sounded like judgments, and the air always smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. I walked up the wide steps with Daniel Hawthorne beside me. He carried his battered leather briefcase like a shield, but I had nothing but the folder in my hands and the truth in my throat. It was 10 in the morning on a Tuesday. The humidity outside was suffocating, but inside, the air conditioning was set to a temperature that felt like a morgue. We entered courtroom B. It was smaller than I expected, with dark wood paneling that seemed to absorb the light. The judge, an older man named Judge Calloway, with thick reading glasses and a hairline that had retreated to the back of his skull, was already reviewing files on his bench. Avery was already there. She sat at the defendant's table, flanked by Marcus Sloan. Sloan was exactly as Daniel had described him, a shark in a 3-piece suit. He was leaning in, whispering to Avery, his hand chopping the air as if he were rehearsing a fight scene. Avery looked pale. She was wearing a navy blue dress that was conservative to the point of being a costume. She didn't look at me when I walked in. She stared straight ahead at the judge's empty chair. Her jaw set so tight, I could see the muscle jumping in her cheek. Graham was not there. He was likely at home, drinking to numb the terror of what was about to happen. Judge Calloway cleared his throat, the sound amplifying through the microphone. Docket number 452, regarding the estate of Theodore and Eleanor Stewart. Emergency motion for injunctive relief and accounting. Sloan stood up immediately, buttoning his jacket. "Your Honor, Marcus Sloan for the respondent. Avery Stewart. We move to dismiss this motion immediately. This is a frivolous filing by a disgruntled beneficiary who is attempting to stall the legitimate administration of an estate." Judge Calloway looked over his glasses. "Mr. Sloan, the motion alleges significant financial irregularities and potential dissipation of assets. That is hardly frivolous." Sloan smiled, a slick, practiced expression that didn't reach his eyes. "With all due respect, Your Honor, the petitioner, Ms. Lillian Stewart, is acting out of emotion, not fact. She is an adopted child who has struggled with the reality of her parents' estate planning. The simple fact is that the parents intended for the biological daughter to manage the property. Ms. Lillian Stewart is essentially a grifter here. exploiting a tragedy to extort a settlement she is not entitled to. The word hung in the air. Grifter. I felt the blood rush to my face. I gripped the edge of the table. Daniel placed a hand on my arm, squeezing gently. "Your Honor," Daniel said, his voice calm and steady, "we are not here to debate my client's lineage. We are here to present evidence of fraud." Daniel walked to the bench. He placed the file from the safety deposit box on the judge's desk. "This is a notarized debt assumption and equity release agreement, signed 2 years ago by Avery Stewart and the deceased parents. In this document, Avery Stewart acknowledges receiving $200,000 in exchange for waiving her future claim to the real property." Sloan froze. He looked at Avery. Avery was staring at the table, her face the color of ash. Daniel continued, "We also have a handwritten letter from the deceased mother, Eleanor Stewart, expressing fear that Avery Stewart would attempt to, and I quote, erase Lillian from the family to cover her debts. And finally, we have the original life insurance policy which shows Ms. Lillian Stewart was a beneficiary until a fraudulent change form was submitted 3 months ago." Judge Calloway picked up the agreement. The room was silent for a long minute. The only sound was the rustle of paper as the judge turned the pages. He looked up at Sloan. "Mr. Sloan, were you aware of this document?" Sloan looked at his client. His face had lost its slick confidence. He leaned down and hissed something at Avery. She didn't respond. "Your Honor," Sloan said, straightening up, his voice tight. We reserve the right to authenticate these documents. My client maintains that these were preliminary drafts, never intended to be binding." Judge Calloway lowered the glasses. "It is notarized. Mr. Sloan, it has a seal." The judge looked at Avery. "Miss Stewart, is that your signature?" Avery stood up. Her legs were shaking so badly I could see her knees trembling against the fabric of her dress. "It was a loan," she whispered. "Speak up," the judge commanded. "It was a loan," Avery shouted, her voice cracking. "I was going to pay it back. I just needed time." Judge Calloway slammed his gavel down. It sounded like a gunshot. "Order. I am granting the temporary injunction immediately. The assets of the Stewart estate are frozen. No property is to be sold, transferred, or encumbered. Ms. Stewart, you are ordered to provide a full accounting of all estate funds within 48 hours. If 1 dime is missing, I will hold you in contempt." "But the sale," Avery cried out, stepping away from the table. "We close in 10 days. If we don't close, if you close, Ms. Stewart, you will be committing a felony," the judge snapped. "We are adjourned." Avery collapsed back into her chair. Sloan began shoving papers into his briefcase, looking like a man who realized he hadn't been paid enough of a retainer for this disaster. I stood up. My legs felt weak, but I was standing. We walked out into the hallway. The marble corridor was filled with people waiting for traffic court and divorce hearings. "Lillian!" I turned. Avery was running after us. Sloan was trying to grab her arm, but she shook him off. "You ruined everything!" she screamed. Her face was twisted, ugly with panic. "Do you know what you just did? I stopped the sale. Avery," I said, "I stopped you from selling a house you don't own. You don't understand," she spat, closing the distance between us. She was close enough that I could smell the wine she must have had for breakfast to get through the morning. "They are going to come for us. For me, for Graham. That is not my problem." I said, "You should have thought of that before you forged Mom's signature on the insurance policy." Avery stopped. She looked at me, and for a second, the panic receded, replaced by a deep, hollow bitterness. "You think you are so perfect," she said. "You always did. Even when we were kids, you walked around like you were the special one." I laughed. A harsh sound. "Me? You were the one who told everyone I was the charity case. You were the one who made sure I knew I was adopted every single day. Because they chose you!" Avery screamed. The hallway went silent. A woman holding a speeding ticket turned to stare. Avery didn't care. She was trembling, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. They were stuck with me. "Lillian, I was the biology. I was the obligation. But they went out and found you. They picked you out of a catalog or whatever it was, and they treated you like you were some gift. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand. I tried so hard. She whispered, I got good grades. I married the right guy. I stayed in Briar Glen. I did everything right. And they still looked at you with that soft look. That look they never gave me. I stared at her. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. All these years, I had thought Avery hated me because I didn't belong, because I was an intruder. But she hated me because she thought I belonged more than she did. It wasn't blood purity. It was insecurity. It was a lifelong, festering wound of jealousy that had convinced her she was the disappointment and I was the prize. Avery, I said softly, they loved you. You were their daughter. They bailed me out, she said bitterly. That is not love. That is maintenance. And now you have taken the only thing I had left to prove I was worth something. You took the house. She stepped back, her eyes cold again. I hope you are happy. Lillian, you won. You burned the family down to save yourself. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking, echoing down the marble hall. Sloane followed her, shooting me a glare that promised nothing but legal billing hours. I stood there, feeling the nausea return. I had won, but it felt like I had just watched an autopsy of my own childhood. We went back to Daniel's office. He closed the door and loosened his tie. He looked exhausted. That went well, legally speaking, he said, pouring 2 glasses of water. But practically speaking, we have a complication. What complication? I asked. The judge froze the assets. She can't sell. Daniel sat down and opened his laptop. I got an email from a contact in Philadelphia while we were in the hearing. I asked him to run a deeper check on Pine Hollow Capital. And? They are not just a predatory lender. Lillian, they are a front for an organized crime syndicate out of South Philly. They move money through real estate. I felt the blood drain from my face. Graham said they were bad. He said they threatened to hurt people. Daniel nodded. The confession of judgment. Avery signed? It has a default clause. If the property becomes subject to any litigation that clouds the title, which we just did, the loan is considered in default immediately. I stared at him. What does that mean? It means Pine Hollow doesn't have to wait for a missed payment, Daniel said. They can move to seize the house today. The judge's order stops Avery from selling it, but it might not stop a secured creditor with a confession of judgment from foreclosing. So I saved the house from Avery just to hand it to the mob? I asked, my voice rising. Daniel rubbed his temples. It is a mess, Lillian. But here is the reality. The house is gone. Between the mortgage, the HELOC, and the Pine Hollow lien, there is zero equity. Actually, there is negative equity. It is a husk. He leaned forward. But you are not. You are the legal owner of the equity that doesn't exist, which means if we push this to a full trial, if we expose Avery for fraud, Pine Hollow might come after the estate for the balance. They might name you in the suit because you are the beneficiary. So what do? We have a choice, Daniel said. Sloane called me 10 minutes ago. He knows they are sunk. He is proposing a structured settlement. Tell me. Avery agrees to walk away. She signs a document admitting the house is yours. She admits the adoption is valid. She gives you the insurance money she stole. Graham apparently has $40,000 left in a 401k he can liquidate to pay you, in exchange. We seal the record. We don't file criminal charges for the fraud. We let her sell the house to the developer immediately, under court supervision, to pay off Pine Hollow. And if I say no, we go to trial. Daniel said, Avery goes to prison for fraud. Graham goes to prison. The house gets seized by Pine Hollow. The Stewart name becomes a scandal that Briar Glen talks about for 20 years, and you get nothing but the satisfaction of seeing your sister in handcuffs. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the sleepy main street of the town I grew up in. I saw the bakery where we got birthday cakes, the library where Marla worked. I thought about the boxes on the porch. I thought about the stolen tote. I thought about the sheer malice in Avery's voice when she told me I didn't belong. She deserved prison. She deserved to lose everything. But then I thought about Mom's letter. Fight for yourself. Mom didn't say destroy Avery. She said do not let her take your place. If I sent Avery to prison, I would be tied to her forever. I would be the sister who put her away. I would be the victim in a tragedy that never ended. I didn't want to be the victim, and I didn't want to be the executioner. I just wanted to be free, make the deal. I said to Daniel. He looked surprised. Really? On 3 conditions. I said, 1. She admits in writing that she lied about the adoption. 2. She pays back the insurance money. 3. I get 1 hour in the house, alone, before the developer takes it. Daniel nodded slowly. I can get that. 2 days later, I met Avery at the house. It was raining. A soft, gray drizzle that made the world look like a watercolor painting. There were no moving trucks. The developer was buying it as is, meaning he was going to bulldoze it. He wanted the land, not the memories. Avery was waiting in her car. When I pulled up, she got out. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. She was wearing jeans and a sweater. No makeup. Her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She looked like the sister I used to have before the money ate her alive. She unlocked the front door. She didn't say anything. She just held it open. I walked in. The house smelled the same. That mix of lemon polish, old paper, and Dad's tobacco. It was the smell of safety. It was the smell of a lie. I realize now, we had never been safe. We had been living on a fault line. I walked through the living room. The furniture was still there, draped in sheets like ghosts. I walked into the kitchen. The table where we had the fight was bare. Avery followed me, staying a few steps behind. She was quiet. I went to the hallway and looked at the wall where the photos used to hang. The pale rectangles were still there, marking the places where we had been a family. I walked to the bedroom that had been mine. It was empty now, stripped by Avery's efficiency, but the window seat was still there, the place where I used to sit and read and dream about growing up. I turned around. Avery was standing in the doorway. She didn't look angry anymore. She looked exhausted. She looked like someone who had been running a race for 40 years and had finally collapsed. The developer comes tomorrow, she said. Her voice was flat. I know. Pine Hollow. They agreed to the payoff amount. Graham and I are moving to an apartment in Scranton. He got a job at a warehouse. I didn't say anything. I didn't wish her luck. I didn't tell her it would be okay. It wouldn't be okay. She had lost her home, her reputation, and her pride. She had to live with Graham, knowing they had destroyed each other. Avery leaned against the doorframe. She looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in months. If I let you in, she whispered, if I let you in that day, would you have stopped? I looked at her. If she hadn't changed the locks, if she hadn't lied, if she had come to me and said, Lillian, we are in trouble. We owe bad people money. We need to sell the house. I would have helped her. I would have sold the house myself. I would have given her my share of the insurance. I would have done anything for her. Yes, I said. I would have saved you. Avery closed her eyes. A single tear tracked through the dust on her cheek. I know, she said softly. That is why I couldn't tell you. I couldn't stand you being the savior. Again. She pushed off the doorframe. Take what you want, she said. It is all going to the landfill tomorrow. She turned and walked down the hall. I heard the front door open and close. She was gone. I stood in the silence of the house. I didn't want the furniture. I didn't want the silver. I didn't want the things that could be sold. I walked back to the kitchen. I opened the cabinet above the stove. It was still there. The wooden recipe box. It was grease-stained and battered. The hinge was broken. Inside were index cards written in Mom's hand, stained with vanilla and tomato sauce, apple pie, Sunday pot roast, chicken noodle soup for sick days. This wasn't property. This wasn't collateral. You couldn't leverage this to buy status. This was the record of every meal we had eaten together, every Thanksgiving, every Christmas. It was the proof that we had been a family, flawed and broken and messy, but real. I tucked the box under my arm. I walked out of the kitchen, through the living room, and out the front door. I stood on the porch for a moment. The rain was falling harder now. I looked at the rhododendron bush. I looked at the driveway where Dad taught me to ride a bike. I took a deep breath. The air tasted of wet earth and ozone. I wasn't an orphan. I wasn't a charity case. I was Lillian Stewart. I was the daughter who stayed. I was the daughter who fought. And I was the daughter who was walking away. I walked down the steps, clutching the recipe box against my ribs. I got into my car and started the engine. I didn't look back at the house. It belonged to the ghosts now. I had a life to find. Thank you so much for listening to the story of Lillian and her fight for the truth. It was a journey through betrayal, grief, and the complicated messiness of what we call family. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Please leave a comment below with your city or country. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more realistic, emotional dramas about justice and resilience, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories. And finally, I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think Lillian made the right choice by letting Avery go? Or should she have sent her to prison? Let me know in the comments in English. Until next time, take care of yourselves.